So you've probably heard the story a million times, right? That the West is in decline, its power's fading, its global influence is just collapsing. It's a narrative you see everywhere. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's not even close? Well, a new analysis from researcher Bonilla suggests something completely different. It argues that the West isn't collapsing at all. In fact, it claims it's actively rearming for a new and really different kind of world war. And that's really the big question, isn't it? I mean, we all see the economic struggles, the political divisions. It's pretty easy to look at all that and just assume the whole thing is falling apart. But the analysis we're digging into today says that view isn't just wrong, it's dangerously naive. And here it is, the core idea. What we're seeing isn't a retreat, it's a massive strategic pivot. The source claims that this group it calls transatlantic elites, this network of big-time political, financial, and military players, they're getting ready to wage a new type of total war. And this isn't a war fought on some distant battlefield, it's one fought in every single part of our lives. So you have to ask, where does a radical strategy like this even come from? Well, according to this analysis, to really get the plan, you first have to understand the mindset that's driving it. And it's a mindset with roots that go way, way back in history. The main driver is described as elite anxiety, basically a deep-seated fear in Western power circles that their spot at the top of the food chain is being threatened by rising powers like Russia and China. So the analysis suggests that instead of, adapting to a world with multiple powers, the reaction has been to double down and find a way to hang on to that dominance, no matter what it costs. And this anxiety, it's not new. The researcher traces it all the way back to a colonial-era worldview, this idea of a standard of civilization that, surprise, surprise, put Europeans at the very top. This same way of thinking popped up again after the Soviet Union fell, when the expectation was that Russia would just, get in line and follow a Western path. When that didn't happen, this old colonial playbook was supposedly dusted off and put right back into use for today's geopolitics. And here's a really stark example that the research points to. A U.S. military intelligence document apparently classifies Russia not as European, but as Eurasian, which it defines as a category of nations that just can't grasp Western ideas of peace and rationality. That kind of framing creates a divide that's basically impossible to bridge. So this creates a really clear split, a real us versus them. On one side, you have the West view of itself as the rational, enlightened keeper of the garden. And on the other side, rivals are painted as irrational barbarians from the jungle who only get one thing: force. The researcher argues that this ideological divide is the key that unlocks and justifies a much more aggressive, all-encompassing kind of war. All right, so if that's the worldview, what kind of military strategy does that lead to? This is where the theory turns into a very real, very modern military doctrine. It's called multi-domain operations. You might have heard other names for it like hybrid warfare or what NATO calls pervasive competition. The main idea here is that conflict isn't some separate event anymore. Nope, it's a constant, never-ending process that seeps into every single part of modern life. And believe me, when they say all domains, they absolutely mean it. The new battlefields aren't just land, sea, and air anymore. We're talking about our financial systems, we're talking about our tech platforms and supply chains, and here's the really wild part: the cognitive realm. That's right, the battle for your own thoughts and perceptions. So this is the crucial takeaway. That old cycle of peace, then war, then back to peace, that scene is totally obsolete now. The new model, as laid out in these strategy documents, is an endless loop. You compete in this gray zone, you escalate toward a potential conflict, and then you go right back to intense competition. Winning isn't the goal. The permanent struggle is the goal. Now, a strategy this ambitious needs a whole new kind of backbone to support it. So how is this vision of permanent warfare actually being built, right now, all across the globe? This quote from the source just nails the concept. The new empire isn't about geographic borders. It's about controlling the global information network. The network itself is the territory, and its law is something called interoperability, which is just a fancy way of saying everyone's systems have to plug in and work together under one big plan. And this isn't just some abstract idea, okay? It's a physical thing being built as we speak, a huge global web of undersea cables, satellite networks, and integrated software platforms. And it's all being designed to let military assets from all these different allied countries operate like one single seamless machine. Just take a look at this mind map from the source material.
It gives you a sense of how insanely complex this is. You don't have to read every single box. Just look at that web of connections. Every single node is a different system. Data storage, sensor grids, weapons platforms, all designed to be linked together. This is basically the blueprint for a global operating system for permanent conflict.
So why should this matter to you? Well, for allied nations, even countries that have been neutral for ages, the implications are massive. Their infrastructure gets sucked into this military web, a lot of the time without any real public debate. Their sovereignty gets watered down in exchange for being technologically dependent. And the whole idea of being neutral, that becomes almost impossible, because once you're plugged into the network, you're in the game. You're part of the system.
Which brings us to the final and maybe the most provocative piece of this whole analysis. Who's actually behind all this? And what's their endgame? The argument here is that this massive strategy isn't really about what's best for the citizens of any one country. Instead, the claim is that it's the pet project of a transnational class of elites. And their main goal? To protect their own privileged spot in the global hierarchy, even if that means destabilizing their own societies to do it. And this creates this chillingly logical and very dangerous feedback loop. If you start with the belief that your opponent is just an irrational barbarian, then you're going to assume they'll always escalate. And if you believe that, the only logical conclusion is that you have to be ready to strike first. It's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy for war. So at the end of the day, what's the big takeaway here? The result of this whole worldview is the deliberate blurring, and maybe even erasing, of the line between war and peace. That distinction, it just disappears. War stops being an event. It becomes a permanent condition of life itself. And that leaves us with one final pretty heavy question. If the new battlefields are our financial systems, our culture, and even what's going on inside our own heads, if every part of human life is being turned into a weapon, then where exactly can we even find peace anymore?